This call may be monitored and recorded for quality assurance.
I'm not totally conversant with this, but we were looking for a pivot hinge, to do this with. I talked to your salesman, I may have talked to you, and we decided to go with this Deltana PH60 knife hinge, which really is more of a cabinet door hinge. I mean, it's robust, but it doesn't leave me any clearance at the floor. I mean, I've got like 3/32, and that's just, I need like a half an inch or 3/4. Is there a hinge that has, I think what we need is something that has a shoulder on it, on the lower hinge, the floor hinge, that would give me some dimension up off the floor, correct? I mean, so I would mortise, something where I would mortise some of it into the floor, but I'd have a stud with a shoulder on it that would set me up with the clearance that I need for that swinging door slab to operate as a passage door, not as a cabinet door. Am I making any sense?
Yes. I mean, the PH60 can work. It's not intended for cabinet doors. What cabinet doors weigh 200 pounds?
I don't know.
But it is intended when you, right, because there aren't any. But what it's intended for is when you specifically don't want anything more than 1/8 of an inch, that sort of business. Small gaps. So how thick are your doors?
1 3/4 inches.
Okay, so the world is wide open to you when it comes to pivots. You want an offset pivot?
Yeah, I think we want the cleanest. I like the way the knife hinge worked, because it was just that, the pivot is offset. It's outside of the plane of the door, right? But it was very clean and simple. There are some offset pivots where that knuckle is pretty gnarly looking, but maybe that's all if I want to get that elevation, maybe that's what I have to go with here.
Nope.
I'm on your website. I'm looking. Yeah, go ahead.
Not necessarily. So Stanley has made a series of pivots for decades, and they say to you, they've been making them so long, the instructions are still based in 1970s thought when you had shag carpeting, and they literally tell you, get a block, right? Get a block of wood, and that you put it underneath. So you can go with a Stanley, you can go with a Deltana, and you're going to put a block of wood underneath there is how they would suggest you do it. But those are wardrobe pivots where you're not really looking for high-end finish carpentry look. So the gnarly knuckle, yes, the latter of what you said is what I think you're going to bump into to do a full-size door that's 1 3/4 thick. Or go center hung if you can, and then you'll have no exposed hardware, but you'll have the downside of needing to contend with or work around the requirement of a radius edge or a bull nose on the door. And there's 2 ways to do that, but it may not be what you want. Do you want an intermediate pivot involved?
Well, so the situation we've got is 2 30-inch slabs, 30 by 80, and a double door situation. So I was assuming then that we set up the opening so that we aren't going to hang, off the door jamb itself. We were assuming we were going to have a top and bottom pivot that was going to be pretty much, near the bottom outside corner of the door, correct? We weren't planning on shifting in 6 inches or to the center of the door or anything like that. We were assuming it was going to be that it would operate, in other words, very similarly to a butt hinge, but it wouldn't be hanging off the jamb. It would be loading on the floor and pivoting at the top headpiece, right? I mean, so.
Yeah, that all sounds great. So you specifically do not want to attach anything to a jamb.
I was trying to avoid, transferring a lot of the load to the jamb. Is there anything that we could,
Well, you're home free. I can give you a part number of a common pivot that will do the job. You want let's see. Okay, so the typical pivot would be a 0117. 0117, that's made by ADH.
I'm looking at it.
Yeah, it's an offset pivot. you know, nothing to the jam, to the floor, to the bottom of the door, to the top of the door, and to the header. You will see those knuckles because that vertical axis of pivoting is, as you said, is offset from the face of the door. You could also do the same concept with a center hung. Nothing would go to the jam, but because of where you're moving that vertical axis of pivoting, you have to radius or round over the door if you want to maintain a tight margin. And that may not be what the plan is, to have a center hung door.
I don't think that's the plan. Yeah.
Yeah.
When you say center hung, you mean pivoting in the center of the door slab?
Exactly.
Center hung.
Offset or center hung is the way to express in your mind's eye where your plumb line is, your vertical axis of pivoting. If you move that to 7/8 from the face of your door into the door, that's where that vertical axis of pivoting is.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah. So we were looking at the offset, and that I'm at your website now. I'm looking at the ABH0117. That looks like a groovy item.
Oh yeah.
What's the difference between that and the 0147? Just heft,
weight capacity. Yeah.
Oh my God, 600 pounds.
Yeah, you at 120 pounds, that door has not even hit teenage years yet. That's a tiny door in terms of pivot capacities.
So what is that bottom pivot on the 0117? Is that going to give me, even if I fully mortise, that's going to give me plenty of clearance at the floor, right? I'm going to mortise that plate into the floor, the square plate.
No, you could. I've never done it that way. I've never seen it done that way. That square plate mounts on the top of your floor. Just surface mounts right to the top. How you achieve your undercut is the relationship between the overall height of the door vis-a-vis the finished opening height, then how far you mortise the bottom arm into the bottom of the door. So the mortise depth is directly related to your undercut. If you want an undercut of X, you must mortise Y. And as X increases, Y decreases. And that's how that's accomplished. So you're gonna say, I want an undercut of 1/2 inch. That means that your door is going to be 5/8 shorter than the frame opening height. Then you're going to look at the template and say, okay, how deep do I mortise that bottom arm to the bottom of the door for a 1/2 inch undercut?
Gotcha. Well, and it looks like from the illustration that's a little hazy. There's a spacer or a gap between that square floor plate and the offset knuckle. There's some space that's been established there.
That's a bit deceiving. That's tight. There is no room there. That's going to sit down nice and tight on. Well, it's going to, the knuckle sits on top of the spindle. The bearing raceway sits on top of the spindle, and when you're standing and you're looking down, you don't really notice that much at all. But also what you're seeing is the cap that covers that as well, which is a slightly larger diameter than the spindle that goes up inside of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there any way I can get, is there a, can I get an actual dimension drawing of this? Where are we here? The 0117.
So when you click on that, and then on the right side, you should see the Add to Cart button. And if you look about 5 inches below that, there'll be a nondescript link called Template, and that's where that document is.
Below that on the right, Template. I'm not.
See the map of the United States on the right side?
I see it.
Yeah.
I see it.
Sorry, it's hidden there. It's awfully crude the way we've got it there. Now, if you could put something to your jam, a real cool way to go would be with sauce hinges. Or
oh, God, yeah. Those things.
But I'm a fan of sauce.
Oh, God. So that knife in with multiple, yeah, I think I know.
It's
well, the
less
problem
work
is
to put sauce in than it is a pivot. it is. Yeah, I mean, I've done all of it. I've done it, yeah, I've done it, so it's no big deal. But I only mention it because it'll be single acting, it'll be thoroughly concealed, and yes, your carpentry needs to be spot on. But outside of that, it's a super elegant solution.
Well, at first blush, so what the architect came up with is we've installed this jamb outside of a plaster opening. It's a cool plaster opening with like an arch, and he wants to retain that 1940s plaster opening, and we've actually installed our jamb on the room side, screwed it through the plaster. Our concern was that this jamb we've installed was not going to be substantial enough to carry the weight of these doors, but we've executed that, and it's pretty frickin' sound. So it's actually a sandwich of solid wood and then half-inch plywood skins on both sides. So it's a 2-inch. How deep do you mortise the sausages?
1.25 inches for sure. I'd have to pull up the template, but it's going to be at least that much. For looking at a sauce, yeah, you said the height of the doors. So for looking at a sauce, a 216 would probably do it, and that the H dimension is 1 7/16 at a minimum, and if you go to the 218 hinge, it would be a little bit more than that. Sauce 218, that H dimension is 1 and 21/32. So you're basically dealing with like 1 5/8.
Whoa.
Yep.
So how's that
anyway
work? Yeah. Okay. So what is that? Maybe I'll just take a quick. What's that stock part number for the sauce hinge?
So it would either be a 216 or a 218. It would be one of those two hinges. You might be able to make the 216 work. It's a little bit smaller, but you'd have to look at the nomograph for sauce to see where that fell in terms of the weight of the item. And that nomograph, I'll pull it up.
Nomograph? What the fuck is that?
Yeah,
weight chart?
well, it's exactly what it is. I don't know. The sauce is the only company that uses that term. But how wide is the door? 2.6, you said? Okay, 2.6, 120 pounds. You could easily 1 3/4 door. Yeah, you're gonna need the 218. Well, you're not gonna need it. You could cheat it and put 3. I would say you could put 3 216s there. You could do that. You could put the 216. You just have to be mindful that your hinge back set doesn't exceed the specific dimension, the face of the door to where the cut starts, and then the face of the frame, so that when your door gets open at 90 degrees, your wood's not burying into each other, the jamb and the door outside corner. But you would only need 2 sauce 218s for that weight of door.
How do you spell sauce?
SOSS.
I knew that. 216. Oh God, yeah. Yep.
Just click on the first one. Yep.
Okay. Well, let me see. I really think that the one that the 0117, it definitely has. It has what my lead carpenter was looking for, which was more space. When we had the Deltana knife hinge, I mean, they were exactly the same hinges, high and low, and there was very little space between the two moving parts. And this thing is established. This has got that shoulder on the pin or the spindle that I think is really what is going to make the difference.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so
And I'm looking at the ABH template, and I do say they refer to the finished floor as if you're to mortise that base to the floor. Again, I've never seen it mortised. Again, I don't see why you couldn't, but I've never seen it that way. It's always been surface mounted.
Okay.
Well, shoot, for that matter, you could get super fancy if you wanted. You could order an extended pivot, then you could bury that below your hardwood or whatever you're doing there. You could get real fancy and make that thing disappear, although maintenance would be someone else's epic problem.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
oh,
that's
an
complicated.
extended spindle. So what's the deal on that?
Well, if you were to bury that floor plate down, let's say to the subfloor, let's say that it was 3/4 inch further, extend your spindle, and then you won't see any of the plate. You'll put your flooring over it, and there'll be nothing coming out but the spindle itself.
Right. Are there spindle height options?
There are, but you would only put that into play if you had an unusual floor condition, or at the top of your door. Well, it doesn't come into play with offset pivots, but at the bottom you could have an extended spindle if you had shag and you were running that puppy down to the subfloor and the shag was going to come over it.
Okay.
Or you were putting in terrazzo, you're putting some flooring condition that the hardware can't sit on top of.
Right. Right. Yeah, I see what you mean. So what's the deal on these spindles? Is that a separate item, or does it come? Is it in the pack, or what's the deal with?
Well, yeah, the bottom pivot will have that spindle included, built into the bottom floor plate. Oh yeah, there's nothing else you need to buy when you order this. You just have to specify your hand and then your finish. And your screw packing should always specify, machine or wood screws or half and half.
Right. So you're saying that the 0117 in the box are going to be multiple spindles, maybe two or three different ones?
No, definitely not. It'll only come with the standard spindle. I don't know what that actual length is, but it would be compliant to hit that minimum and maximum undercut that's there. And then you could order beyond that in half-inch increments to get a longer spindle. And all you're really doing is changing that minimum and maximum value of the undercut. The spindle is not something that's field replaceable.
Oh. Geez. Well, yeah, so I'm struggling here trying to, I've got a fair amount of information, but without seeing it, I don't know if this is going to satisfy everybody. So I guess, clearly the Deltana PH60s are not going to do it. So I guess I should go ahead and get, two sets of this 0117, and I guess my only other option, if for some reason we can't make this work, is what do I have to order? You stock these in with bottom plates that in half-inch increments, or is that just a separate?
No, I should never have mentioned an extended spindle.
Okay.
It's only used when you have a flooring condition that's unusual. It sounds like you'll either surface mount that plate, or you will actually mortise your floor 3/16 deep and make it flush to the floor, which I don't see why you would do unless you wanted to. You certainly could.
Right.
But other than that, I should never have mentioned an extended spindle. It doesn't come into play in your application.
You never should have mentioned that. Okay. So. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that this is going to work. So can we? Can you handle my reorder, or how do we go about this?
Yeah, of course. Is there already an order profile in the system?